I'm actually going to start with the beginning of the film, in the sense that I don't know how to put this, but so the way the film opens with the lights, the way they are, and the dance and the pujo and all of that, it's actually very very seductive. And also because it's lovely to see people dance, and you see, so you're kind of thinking things, and then of course the invisible city excerpt and the kind of framing that happens of the old and the new while Venice is being talked about. So for instance, the dilapidated building, the typical Calcutta yellow taxi with the new blue, and that kind of framing. And at that point in time, the first time when I saw it, I kept thinking, oh, this is like an ode to the city. This is one of those nostalgic Calcutta films. And before you know it, you completely shatter the audience because you're actually taking us somewhere else with the Banerjee poetry that starts after that, which becomes even more apparent with the breakfast sequence and the words. And so I actually, and also given whatever little I've read and seen of your works earlier, given your obsession with Calcutta in a way, with cities in a way,
Calcutta more.
with
Yes.
Calcutta, and yeah, I was actually wondering how did this whole, when you first began to think about this film, how was it? I mean, was this the kind of structure you had in mind, or what was that like? If you could just start with that, maybe.
Well, I've been called a self-indulgent filmmaker before, and no doubt will be again. But one
Indulgence
of
is
the
not a bad thing.
well, sometimes. So one of the things that I like to do, and I think if Reena's still sitting here, she hasn't run away. Good. She will vouchsafe, and is that with 11 Miles, with Tales from Planet Kolkata, and with Memories of Milk City, the three earlier films that I made, which were is that you have a certain set of ideas and certain sets of images, sounds, maybe text, and you start to play with them. And then when you shoot, what you actually get in the shoot dictates how you structure the film or what actually goes into the film, rather than having a super clear idea of what you want, and then there's a little bit of wiggle room depending on what you get. Uh, I am among those filmmakers who actually goes out and starts shooting and looks at the footage a lot, thinks of the experience of what one has seen, what's going on, and also if you have the luxury or the possibility, which in this case I did, which you have a small camera and you're shooting and thinking about stuff as you go along. You're not scrunched into a shooting schedule of 2 weeks or 1 month or anything like that. So, for example, uh, the first sequence I kind of shot, I was playing around with, was the one on which the Marco Polo voiceover comes. That was shot in 2009, probably at some point. The police rally and stuff was shot after Rizwan dies and Mamata is agitating. So that was also 2000. I mean, the film was shot in bits and pieces across a year and a half, actually, and very small. I mean, you have a small camera, you go out to shoot, something's happening outside your window, you shoot. The Stephen Court fire takes place while I'm actually editing the film. So this massive fire takes place. So then that changes what's happening with the film. So then I go with a proper film crew, Ranu's there, the sound recordist is there, and we're actually shooting on Park Street whatever's going on, and shooting the cameras, shooting the fire and the cops and all that stuff. So uh, the film kind of grows organically, and this is, as I said, it's 10 poems, if you like, and 3 songs, and they're numbered oddly to indicate that there are many more poems possible. So it starts with 44, goes to 45, number 1 comes only 6th, and it's random numbering. So these are just 10 poems and 3 songs of the many that could be there for the city. So there's stuff that we've left out as well, and wonderful stuff, sequences, lucky that we got them. One day I'll edit them, also make them into some other film. But it develops like that. And a film like this especially does develop like that.
Actually, it's so interesting what you're saying because I was earlier thinking, there's so much intertextuality in all your work.
Sorry, one more thing. Jyoti Basu dies while. So that also gets filmed during.
That's actually an amazing sequence.
And Shumantoda's thing was always going to be there. So actually, I filmed him in Dehradun, him reading out all the stuff. And then the old man kind of leaves us for Comrade Heaven in the Sky. And so then that becomes a natural conclusion to the film in a sense, because I am talking about the disintegration, the demise of the left in a sense.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. No, Richard, also, I just because you said the film has been shot over time and you've shot it with the small camera, so you've had had a luxury of sort of going back.
Well, some mostly with a small camera.
With a lot with a small camera, which is very, I mean, it's very liberating, right, to shoot in that way. But what I wanted to actually also kind of talk about, like I was saying, there's always so much intertextuality in all your works. So, for instance, yesterday when Mukul was talking to you about referencing and how you always reference, you know, there's always that in a lot of your earlier works as well, and in your writings, in your photo essays, or, you know, the kind of articles that you write. For instance, in a film like this, when you're working with poetry or you're working with text, which is, you know, and the heart of the poetry is image making. So I was wondering, when the first time, you know, that water image that you see in the beginning in the film, well, footpath ke side mein, I kept thinking, what is it reminding me of? Also because of the way it's been shot. It's not a very, you know, it's by the road. It's not like a top angle side. It's not glorified in any way. It's just like आप चलते हुए पानी को देखते हैं, उस तरह से shoot किया गया है वो. And it reminded me of this, whatever little I've read of Jivananda Das, it reminded me of that poem called Night, because he talks about a water spout there and the lepers coming to the city. And I was wondering then, as a filmmaker, when you're working with so much text which contains image at the heart of it, which is poetry, how does that impact your image making? You know, in a sense, what happens to that? So you're working with poetry which is laden with images, and then there's your own image that comes in.
I mean, the thing is basically OTT, because in Calcutta, when Bengalis and non-Bengalis are like, we love our texts and our intertextuality, yes. And now it's lived last 50, 60 years with a lot of film knowledge as well. So, and, you know, you have the kirtans and all the spiritual stuff going on as well. So there's no point being afraid of words or text if you are dealing with Bengal or Calcutta. You can overdo it, but also not, perhaps, sometimes. So, in fact, there was a whole sequence which I've cut out from the PSPT version of the film where there was a whole Jivanananda poem, not Night, but I think another one, can't remember the name now, and with a long sequence of the Bandh, because that water and stuff is shot during a Bandh, where the whole city is on strike, and that becomes much more apparent in that other sequence, but I dropped that because it didn't fit, it didn't work for me. So, yeah, some of the poems that are on the screen are written by me. Then there's reference to Jivanananda, which is what Shumanto is talking about when he's at Baliganj in 1946. The man wandering around the dead bodies is Jivanananda. And then, of course, there's sort of the absent Tagore through the whole thing. And then you have the pictures and the stuff. So, I mean, one of the things I felt, which is very different from Tales from Planet Kolkata, is that whether, because I was very aware it was being funded by Channel 4, and I was very conscious of an audience that's not just bound to Calcutta or Bengali speakers. I gave a lot of windows and ins into the film in my voiceover or in references about what was going on. In this film, I think I kind of now realize it was the first time I'm showing it outside Calcutta to a public audience. So I realized that I haven't given those kind of windows and those kind of clues or gripping points for an audience. Perhaps it needs to be reworked to weave that in somewhere, because at the moment, people who are Bengali, people who know Calcutta, people who know current Calcutta would get a lot more out of it without any explanations. I mean, they would understand Jyoti Basu's funeral, they would understand Rizwanul Haq, they would understand the Stephen Caught fire, but they would also understand the older references to P. John Bhattacharya, to Ritik Ghatak, all that stuff. Whereas a non-Bengali audience or a non-Indian audience might find that somewhat mystifying or opaque, or like, hey, he's not talking to us somehow. But that's a possible flaw that I noticed just now. But
it's also interesting. I don't know. I mean, yeah, because one did get a lot of references as well. But what happens when you don't get the references? What is the kind of narrative that unfolds then for an audience which doesn't necessarily understand Hari Prasad? What does that poetry do? And I mean, that's also interesting.
Well, then the hope is, I mean, you're on a wing and a prayer that you hope that the images and the sound are interesting enough and fascinating enough that, because I remember seeing a film in Oberhausen. It was me and Amar Khan, where we both went to see this film about this Japanese guy, old master, who sits in his little house next to the rail tracks and films this video, the changing seasons in his garden in his house. And that's all he does. So there's a train that passes by overhead somewhere, and then there are birds, and then there are flowers, and then there's lots of haiku and poetry. And it's so rich and deep, that film, but it's also so rooted in Japanese culture that you feel you're not getting half of what he's talking about. But the half that you're getting keeps you glued to your seat. So there's some kind of hope that some of that kind of effect might happen while people watch this.
Sure, yeah.
So
the other thing that actually, and after that we can open it out for audience and figure whether they've actually got it or not. But like yesterday, I was saying to you, uh, I actually found the film very angry. Like I thought the film was a very, you know, it's like when you're with a lover and you can't be with the, you know the lover so well, you don't know what to do with it. It's like one of those.
And you can't divorce and walk away.
Exactly. You cannot disentangle in any way. And in a sense, I felt unlike Tales from Planet Kolkata, which was, which is not tongue in cheek. It's fun in that way. This is this is much more restrained. It's very angry. So I sort of read from it, and also the fact that this kind of distinction that is increasing in every city in India now. Between classes, between people. So, for instance, even the way you shoot your working classes were always out of focus. The buildings are in crisp, sharp focus. Even that kind of image making. So I don't know. So I don't know. Would you like to talk a little bit about how?
Well, I think I was 30, what is it, 33 when I made Tales from Planet Kolkata, and I just finished 11 Miles when I was 31. So yes, there was anger and irritation with the city, but there was also kind of hope that things would change and stuff. At 50, it's different, and you by then had really 34 years of the left-front government, and after that, now we've had 5 years of Mamatas for our sins. So um, I'm glad you saw that anger, because it is actually a very quietly angry film. So beyond the point, satire and humor are there very much, but they also fall apart, and you kind of push them aside and say, no, fuck this. This is wrong. This is absolutely, actually, it's murder. It's 2 or 3 different kinds of murder. The fire traps that are in the city, the people who die there, that's murder. When you push a young man who happens to be from a minority community to suicide, if you don't get him killed, which there's a doubt about that, and the cops are in cahoots with putting the pressure on him, that's another kind of murder. And then there is the kind of murder that happens daily with the lack of sanitation, the lack of food, the lack of thing that happens in the slums. And so there's different kinds of, when we now talk about Rohit Vemula or whatever, and people say the murder of. I mean, Calcutta as a city has had ongoing murder, and you witness this stuff, and you're privileged enough and lucky enough to kind of escape or be kind of away from it a little bit. But if you can't avert your eyes from it. So there is very much an anger, and there's no blue and white in this yet, because blue and white is yet to come. Huh? This finishes in 2010. Yeah. Mamata comes into power a year later, yeah. And then I don't know what films can be made now, but I'm sure some have been made. But yeah.
Yeah. Okay, one more question. I have many, but I'm just going to end with this one. I was actually also wondering, oh, sorry. When you were introducing the film, you said this is not a sociological sort of treatise. I'm not looking at that. But in a sense, is it not, or did you think of it as a kind of a historical archive of the city, the life of the city itself? Because you are following through Banerjee's writings a certain timeline, and then you're sort of also opening out other things which are actually happening in the present through that. So when you conceptualize this idea, was it somewhere? Was this some? I mean, this historical sort of narrative of the city. Was it a thought that was in your head, or did it just happen? Because
well, Shubhantada's writing was something that came to my attention. So actually, I was thinking of a circular motif. So there's the room, there's the fire, there is the pujo dance, there's the taxis. Now these are things that you, like in a poem, you keep circling back to, or in a series of poems, images or tropes or whatever. And the one line running through that, for me, was the sort of historical timeline of like, let's start from the famine, let's move to partition. He has other stuff between partition and Nondigram, which is what the 2007, the Hormuz Bahini, the Cater Army stuff is about. But I leave all that and just come to the present. It is deliberately uneven, asymmetrical, but to keep that window open while circling around these different layers of repetitive stuff. So even with Rizwan's murder, I'm not laying out what actually happens with this death. I'm not actually laying out in detail what happens with the Stephen Court fire, which takes place in one of Calcutta's, poshest streets at one level. I'm not talking about who Jyoti Basu was and what it meant and what his death meant or any of that. I'm just showing the people walking, and then they start walking backwards to the Internationale. And I think Paro's here, one of the things that was very interesting is she was making partners in crime at the same time, and both of us came up with the same idea independently in exchange. And Paro actually does it because she had a heavy metal band doing the Internationale. And I had a plan because Calcutta is full of guitar bands. Maya, are you around? Yeah, so you're not part of them, I know. I'm sure you're witness to it, Pradeep, as well. So a lot of guitar bands who constantly play Pink Floyd and stuff. So I was going to get somebody in a guitar band to actually do the International, and not heavy metal, but like lead, Hendrix Star Spangled Banner. I didn't do it. But so it was all these kind of things going on um, in one's head at that time. I don't know if I'd be able to make something like this now, but I think even the city shifted, or how you can film it has shifted in the last 5 years, I think. But,
Sure. Yeah.
so
Okay. Any questions? Anybody?
Why? Like, it's all about Calcutta, so why is it called My Rio, My Tokyo or something?
okay, so two references there. One is Mrinal Sen made a film called My El Dorado about Calcutta in the early 80s. It's not, to my mind, a very good film, but it was the first kind of sort of famous filmmakers were asked to make a sort of tribute to their cities. So Mrinal Sen made one about Calcutta called My El Dorado. And at that time, I remember thinking that why is Mrinalda calling it El Dorado, which is a rural, um, sort of heavenly palatial retreat or something? What does it have to do with the city? So I was thinking about that, and then about this whole Italo Calvino, my invisible city stuff, that every city that you visit is colored by the first city that you know. Or if you come from a city, the mother's Ur city that you come from. So everything being schizoid in Calcutta, it's both my Rio de Janeiro and my Tokyo. If Tokyo is a kind of contained or a different kind of craziness, northern craziness, if you like, and Rio is a southern craziness. Calcutta is somewhere in between. It is neither Rio nor Tokyo. That's the joke. But my Rio, my Tokyo. So in that sense.
Um, well, that's the problem of making a film that is opaque to many of us because we don't get into it enough to. But I have the courage to ask a question after she did. Um, but the last sequence was not. It was really wonderful to watch. Actually, it's really pleasurable to watch the last sequence. The Jyoti Basu sequence was very pleasurable. Um, but my question, and like you've already stated, if one is not familiar with Kolkata, then perhaps some of the film is opaque. But what were the numbers?
The numbers are random, if you had a book of poems, and if you're not reading the book in sequence. So you open one page and it's the 45th poem, and then you open the next page, it's the 44th poem, and you go to the beginning of the book. So what I guess I'm trying to say is that you can look at the film sequentially, because obviously I've placed the different chapters in a sequence, but you could also think of it not in that particular sequence should you choose. And that there are other poems, other songs that you're not seeing here that could be possible. So it doesn't go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And even though there are 10, it starts with 44, 45, 67, 12, like that, to give that sense of randomness, as you would in a book of poems, or like that. That was the idea, at least.
You talked about the randomness of the numbers of the poems, and what if you change the you have a certain flow of sequences in the film, and if you put them in random order, change the order of the sequences, would the film uh, uh, still
Still hold.
or would you like to? Or I mean, I'm curious how we can find more randomness, not in a chronological order or not in any order.
No, sure. I mean, I would. I mean, basically, when I was making the film, I was already aware of how we were talking about it yesterday. Anirban's here somewhere. About how we now view the great classics on our computer. We fast forward, go back, stop somewhere, go start talking to somebody, switch to some website, look at news, and come back and restart. We don't treat cinema as this kind of holy thing that you'd go in a cinema hall and sit and watch in continuous sort of with some quote unquote respect and awe and silence, like in a church or a temple or prayer thing. We now treat all these things, whether it's Ozu or Tarkovsky or Satyajit Ray or whatever. We'll switch back and forth. We will go back and say, "अच्छा वो sequence फिर से देखने क्या है वो?" We don't really. We have that ability now. So I was kind of thinking while making this film, what would it be like if I could actually make something where I could maybe hyperlink it at some point where people could change the sequences as they liked. Or if you thought of it as a gallery space where you somehow had headphones or something where the sound could be cut off, and you moved from monitor to monitor as you liked, watching the sequences in different configurations. I mean, in different sequence, watching the different each thing and making your own configuration. I'd be quite interested to see what would happen with that. And that was at the back of my mind with this. I mean, there is a flow. There's a reason why everything is, and the one chronological thing very much is Shimontada talking about the famine first, then about the Bengal killing, and then 2007. But the 2007 could come first, and then we could remember the famine. I don't know what would happen. I haven't tried it. But I'd be quite open for people to mess around with this. I mean, this is one film where I put the sequence together, but I could fool around with it. If somebody else wanted to, and there's technology to do it, I'd encourage it. Because it's circular, because it's a poem form. There is this great model I have of Julio Cortázar's book called Hopscotch. And I urge, if you can get hold of it, for everyone to read it. It's, again, he does the same thing, and he does it, in the year I'm born, so 1960. And he writes it in Spanish. He's a Mexican writer. And the book is deliberately designed not to be read in sequence. It's like hopscotch, so you jump from square to square as you like. And before hyperlinking is even thought of, perhaps he's got little links, so you can actually move back and forth in that book and read different sequences first, later, etc. It's a sort of groundbreaking classic, not yet recognized. So that was one model in my head when I was thinking about this particular film. Nowhere near worthy of mentioning in the same sentence as Cortázar's book, but I'm just saying as an inspiration.
Normally when we talk about cities, at least in a lot of Indian stuff about cities, it's always been very structural kind of conversation. In that sense, your work is very different because it's very private. By private, I don't mean internal only, but like it's very personal relationship with the city and I mean, my question's haphazard, but I'm still thinking it through. But because cities always seen as places where there's loneliness, migration, alienation, but that's not really the material your films are made of in a sense. So can you speak a little bit about what your sense of Calcutta cityness is that imbues your films in a way?
I don't know if there's one sense of Calcutta cityness. I mean, it's such a... I mean, all cities, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, just to name three, are so hard to grasp. They're so slippery. And when you're living immersed in that city, you can look at some things like, why are there no places for women's toilets in a city? You can do that. You can build a fantastic film as you've done around that. Or I can see the Bowles relationship to Calcutta and 11 Miles and make a portrait of a city where the bridge is being built, it's still incomplete. The metro is being built, it's still incomplete. But already things are in chaos, and the supposed public works are actually reflecting a kind of ongoing anarchy and chaos in Calcutta, kind of dark anarchy, if you like, and a humor. So, and my sense of cityness in Calcutta has changed radically over the years. It's very hard for me to pinpoint what I felt about Calcutta during the time I made Tales from Planet Kolkata, which is 92, 93, end of 92, beginning of 93. Then would come, I would say, my novel Last Jet Engine Laugh, which was finished in 2001. Then there's a whole period of other stuff, and then there was a film on Delhi called Mercedes for Ashish, and then comes this film, which is at one level a dash off in the sense that it's got to be done quickly. It's in a very limited budget. Not excuses, I'm just putting it in context. Which is a good thing, because otherwise I would have taken 5 years and not finished the film or something. So I would say with Calcutta, I've had a sort of cyclical thing of engaging with the city, going out into the streets, and then kind of living in the city but withdrawing from it and living in a kind of cocoon. And sometimes it's the politics of the city or what's going on in the city that's pushed me out of my house and out of my comfort zone into dealing with what's going on in the streets. And other times it's been my curiosity. I can't really put my finger on what my relationship to Calcutta is at that level. What I can say is that there is a continuum of absurdity in Calcutta. The absurdity of a mason worker who is working on a top floor of a house with no protection, no insurance, minimum pay, hears about a fire in Park Street. They all come down the bamboo scaffolding, get to Park Street because they know they can climb up that house, and the fire brigade is not there. So here you have a city which is very cruel in the way it treats its poor, as all cities are, but Calcutta is specifically kind of grim in a certain kind of way. And you have these working class kids risking their lives, not thinking twice about climbing up 4 floors and rescuing middle class bourgeois people because it's humanity. And they're not doing it for the TV cameras. They're not doing this. It's like, korte hobe, chalo karte hain. And the fire brigade, which is actually 10 minutes down the road, one of the biggest fire stations, fails to come and get into operation. Something is not working. The fire tender is not working. The water thing is not working. The machines are sitting there. No one's bothered to look at them despite the heavy fires in the city. This kind of absurdity, I don't think you'd get in Bombay or Delhi, quite. So that is a particularity of Calcutta, the continuing ongoing melancholy of Calcutta, which you can't somehow seem to escape despite the humor. These are the kind of things that one connects to, and the violence and the darkness, which is again, I think the Delhi darkness or Bombay darkness is different somehow. I again can't put my finger on it, but yeah, it's slippery because I'm also, as you know, writing this novel which is set in Calcutta in the Second World War. So I'm trying to deal with what the city could have been then and living in today's Calcutta. So it's quite a schizophrenia-making thing at one level.
Just a comment. If you know Bengali, throughout your film, you have a multitude of dialects, various, from Shumanta Babu's absolutely polished Bangla to Sala minister, pehle paisa banaya abhi. So that's one thing is missing in subtitle. The layers and the stories of migration are also there in the dialect. That's one thing is missing.
No, good point. Pradeep's absolutely right, because there's a kind of Hindi that's there's a kind of working class Bengali, there's a kind of street Changra Bengali, then there's a kind of modern Bengali that comes in the songs. There's Suchismita Bengali, which is, thank you, yes, which is a kind of middle class, fashionable, certain kind of Bengali. And then there is Shumanta that's very polished, but at the same time very, very clean, very unpompous, but very beautifully written Bengali. So, I mean, these are things, and yet we don't even have the Mamata Bengali in this, or the Jyoti Basu communist Bengali in this. Somehow that's been left out, and the Tollywood Bengali, those are missing. But anyway, it's a good point, Pradeep. Thanks. Okay, I think. Thank you all. Thank you very much.